Welcome to True Crime Tuesday, where the truth is scarier than fiction. Each week, we dive deep into the darkest corners of human nature, exploring real-life crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and infamous killers. From chilling disappearances to horrifying serial crimes, these stories are as disturbing as they are true. So if you think you can handle the horror, stay tuned, because some of these cases are so terrifying, you may not sleep tonight. The O.J. Simpson murder trial. In the quiet hours of June the 12th, 1994, while most of Brentwood slept under the blanket of a warm California night, blood pooled on the walkway of 875 South Bundy Drive. The pristine, affluent neighborhood, where residents paid premium prices for safety and seclusion, became the stage for what would unfold into the most publicly consumed murder case in American history. Two bodies lay brutally slashed in the front courtyard of a condominium. One, a young woman named Nicole Brown Simpson, once the golden girl with a radiant smile, now crumpled like a discarded doll, her head nearly severed from her body. The other, Ronald Goldman, a 25-year-old waiter who had simply come to return a pair of forgotten eyeglasses. His body was riddled with defensive wounds, telling the silent story of a man who fought desperately for his life. And across town, in a mansion on Rockingham Avenue, slept a man whose name was synonymous with American excellence, Orenthal James Simpson, OJ to millions of adoring fans, football legend, movie star, advertising icon. The man who ran through airports for Hertz and into the hearts of America was about to embark on a different kind of run, one that would divide a nation and redefine the intersection of celebrity, race, justice, and media forever. This is not just a story about murder. It's about the darkest corners of fame, the blinding spotlight of racial tension, and what happens when justice becomes a spectacle played out for an audience of millions. What you're about to witness is the deconstruction of the American hero, the systematic unraveling of the facade that we as a culture helped create. Because when O.J. Simpson became the prime suspect in the murder of his ex-wife and an innocent bystander, America was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about itself. At 5 a.m. on June 13th, Detectives Mark Fuhrman and Philip Vaneter arrived at Simpson's estate on Rockingham Avenue. They claimed they were there merely to inform Simpson of his ex-wife's death, but a critical decision was made. They entered the property without a warrant. What they found would become crucial evidence: a single leather glove matching one found at the murder scene, dark stains in Simpson's white Ford Bronco, and most damning of all, blood drops leading from the Bronco to Simpson's front door. But Simpson himself wasn't home. He had taken a late-night flight to Chicago, only to return when notified of Nicole's death. This timeline, these precious uncounted 4 hours, would become the subject of intense scrutiny in the months to come. 4 days after the murders, on June 17th, instead of surrendering to police as agreed, Simpson fled. A suicide note was found, His passport and $8,000 in cash were in the possession of his friend Al Cowlings. What followed was perhaps the most surreal moment in American television history. As Simpson held a gun to his head in the back of the white Ford Bronco, his childhood friend Al Cowlings drove down the Los Angeles freeways at a mere 35 miles per hour. 95 million Americans watched the slow-motion chase, abandoning NBA Finals broadcasts and dinner plans to witness a fallen hero's desperate flight. This is the Los Angeles Police Department. Pull your vehicle to the curb and shut off your engine. When the Bronco finally returned to Simpson's Rockingham estate, the world held its breath as darkness fell and negotiations continued. After nearly an hour, Simpson surrendered, clutching family photos and assuring officers, "I'm not running anymore." On July the 22nd, 1994, O.J. Simpson stood before Judge Lance Ito and declared his innocence with two simple words that would reverberate through courtrooms and living rooms alike. "Absolutely, 100% not guilty," O.J. Simpson said. But the prosecution, led by Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, believed they had assembled an airtight case, the evidence appearing overwhelming. Blood matching Simpson's was found at the crime scene. Blood matching the victims was found in Simpson's car and at his home. The infamous gloves, one at each location, were rare and expensive, purchased by Nicole and documented in store records. And perhaps most damning, DNA evidence that was still revolutionary in courtrooms at that time seemed to place Simpson squarely at the scene of these brutal murders. Add to this a documented history of domestic violence against Nicole. Police had been called to their residence 8 times over the years, and the prosecution felt confident. But Simpson had assembled what the media would dub the Dream Team: Johnny Cochran, F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, and Robert Shapiro, legal titans who would orchestrate one of the most remarkable defense strategies ever seen. Their approach was threefold: attack the evidence collection methods, question the reliability of DNA technology, and most controversially, inject the specter of racial bias into the proceedings. This strategy crystallized around Detective Fuhrman, one of the first officers at both crime scenes. The defense suggested Fuhrman had planted evidence out of racial animus towards Simpson. When tapes emerged revealing Fuhrman's history of using racial slurs, contradicting his own sworn testimony, the prosecution's case began to crumble from within. When Fuhrman eventually took the Fifth Amendment to avoid self-incrimination regarding evidence tampering, the doubt that had been meticulously planted in jurors' minds began to bloom into full-fledged skepticism of the entire prosecution narrative. Then came the moment that had been seared into legal history. Christopher Darden, against the advice of Marcia Clark, asked Simpson to try on the bloody gloves in front of the jury. As Simpson struggled with the leather, which appeared too small for his hands, Johnny Cochran found the phrase that would define the case. "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." Johnny Cochran's footage. Those 8 words, delivered with the cadence of a preacher, became more than a legal argument. They became a cultural touchstone, a simple, memorable rhyme that distilled complex legal proceedings into something any juror or viewer could grasp. The trial had become America's obsession. Productivity plummeted as workers huddled around television sets. Soap operas were preempted. Viewership exceeded that of major historical events. The public was divided, often along racial lines, about Simpson's guilt or innocence. A 1994 poll revealed that while 60% of white Americans believed Simpson was guilty, 68% of black Americans believed him innocent. The trial was no longer just about two murders in Brentwood. It had become a referendum on race, policing, and justice in post-Rodney King Los Angeles. For the jurors, sequestered for 265 days, the longest sequestration in American history. The pressure was immense. Cut off from families, from news, from the national conversation their deliberations would fuel, they listened to testimony for 134 days. They heard from 133 witnesses. They were presented with 1,105 pieces of evidence. As the trial stretched from months into nearly a year, fatigue set in. Several jurors were dismissed. Allegations of jury tampering swirled. The American public grew both weary and more entrenched in their beliefs. In closing arguments, prosecutor Marcia Clark made a passionate plea for justice for the victims, meticulously outlining the physical connecting Simpson to the crime. But Johnny Cochran transformed the trial's narrative one final time. This case is not just about Mark Fuhrman, it's about the LAPD and these detectives who will lie to convict someone they believe is guilty. If they lied about one thing, they will lie about others. If they planted one piece of evidence, they have planted others, Johnny Cochran said. And with those words, reasonable doubt, the standard by which criminal cases are decided, found fertile ground. On October 3rd, 1995, an estimated 150 million people, more than half of America's population at the time, paused to watch the verdict. Businesses closed, government meetings were delayed, water usage in New York City dropped precipitously as people refused to leave their televisions, even for bathroom breaks. We, the jury, in the above entitled action find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder, said the court clerk. The nation's reaction played out like a visible representation of America's divide. In predominantly white gatherings, there was stunned silence, sometimes tears. In predominantly black gatherings, there were often celebrations, not necessarily for Simpson himself, but for what many viewed as a rare instance in the justice system not working against the black man. O.J. Simpson was a free man, but freedom didn't mean redemption. As he returned to his mansion, the crowds outside were divided between supporters and protesters. The country he had once unified through athletic excellence now stood fractured in the wake of his legal victory. For the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the verdict offered no closure, only more pain. Fred Goldman, Ron's father, spoke through tears outside the courthouse. Justice was not served, Fred Goldman said. The criminal trial was over, but the story wasn't. In a subsequent civil trial, where the burden of proof was lower, Simpson was found liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages, money the families have struggled to collect in the decades since. Today, 875 South Bundy Drive has a different address, a different appearance, a deliberate attempt to erase the physical reminder of what happened there. But the case's impact remains indelible. The Simpson trial transformed how we consume justice and celebrity. It gave birth to the 24-hour news cycle. It made legal analysts into celebrities. It elevated figures on the periphery into the spotlight, including a defense attorney named Robert Kardashian, whose family would later redefine celebrity for a new generation. The trial introduced complex DNA evidence to the public consciousness years before shows like CSI would make it commonplace. It forced a national conversation about domestic violence that helped lead to the Violence Against Women Act, and it exposed the deep racial divisions that persisted in America, divisions that continue to this day. For Simpson himself, life after acquittal brought new legal troubles. In 2008, he was convicted of armed robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas, serving 9 years in prison before being released in 2017. His life became a cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of fame, the dangers of domestic violence, and the complicated intersection of celebrity, race, and justice. But at the center of this American saga remains two victims, often overshadowed by the spectacle their deaths created. Nicole Brown Simpson, a mother, daughter, sister. Ronald Goldman, a young man with aspirations and loved ones. Their lives ended violently on that June night, setting in motion a series of events that would capture America's attention and reshape its cultural landscape. The bodies have long been buried, the evidence has been stored away. The key players have moved on, or in some cases, passed away. But the questions that the trial raised about race, about justice, about celebrity, about truth itself, continue to haunt us. Because in many ways, the O.J. Simpson trial wasn't just about one man's guilt or innocence. It was about America itself, its divisions, its prejudices, its obsessions, and ultimately its endless fascination with the fall of its heroes. The case is closed, but the wounds remain open. Thank you for joining me for this episode of True Crime Tuesday Stories. I'll see you next time as we continue to uncover the dark truths hidden in the shadows of everyday life.